age dating of this particular site to better constrain how old this seamount is and maybe which hotspot group it might belong to. And we're also looking at microbial communities that are found on and within the rock. So we have multiple rock needs across multiple different scientists in our party. In addition to the rocks, we're also keeping an eye out for high density or high diversity biological communities, and we suspect these will be largely deep water coral and sponge dominated. So we'll be looking at patterns and transitions within these communities or between communities as we go up the side of the seamount.
Thank you. And we are going a bit deeper than we did yesterday. Do you anticipate that bringing any major changes, especially in the initial part of this dive?
It depends on what the substrate is like too. We are probably going to be landing, touching down in an area that is may not be as sloped as yesterday. This particular ridge is more gradual in places. So we'll see. There could be pockets of sediment, for example, or it could be entirely current swept due to the strong topographically induced current flows that kind of flow and scour away sediment from these types of ridges. So it could be different. I suspect we'll probably see a couple of the same species, but we are a little bit of ways away, but not entirely in a different geographic area. So we'll see.
Thank you. And if you can all stay awake, you'll see too. Jess, are you able to join us back on SPL? I don't mean to interrupt.
We were talking about Werther's.
About
not
what?
A sponsor. Werther's hard candy.
Yep, sorry about that.
No, you're good. Just kind of listening. I don't know if you were listening in, but I know you do know some of the main objectives of the dive and wondering how that translates to how Hercules is equipped. Are there any major differences from yesterday's dive? What are some of the things that you all have prepared for Hercules?
Yeah, actually, everything's pretty standard to yesterday's dive as well. Same instruments on board, 3 push cores. We still got all the divisions in the starboard and the toolbox in front. Yeah, so everything's pretty standard. We're ready to get some good samples for you guys. Ascend slowly this ridge and have a fun time.
Yes, Steve, you may have covered this, but now that we're in the monument, we have slightly different stipulations on our sampling, or effectively the same.
Yep. Yeah, we have some permitted activities that we're allowed to do, and as well as caps on the amount of material, living or geological, that we're allowed to take at a given site. So I think, yeah, we'll see how productive these sites are for our science party, but we'll be mindful of that for making sure we abide by our limits in the monument.
And we've heard a few voices in the control van. Our whole shift is not here yet, since we're still on that descent mode. But Jake, I don't want you to feel left out. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us your role.
Yes, my name's Jake. I am the Argus pilot, sitting next to the Hercules pilot, and I will be assisting Jess for this watch.
And what is Argus's role? Is there anything unique in the descent portion of a dive?
So I'm operating the winch, which controls the depth of Argus, and I try to match the speed of descent with Hercules, which is we're at about 30 meters per minute right now.
Quite a bit faster than the ascent.
Yep.
Double time.
Gravity.
Gravity.
No samples.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, Jake. I definitely don't want to leave Jeff out here. Jeff, what's your role in a descent portion of the dive?
What's my role in the descent? Stay awake?
He's monitoring.
Yeah, I'm just monitoring, making sure everything's, healthy, that we're recording what we need to record. I'll take the early part of the dive to balance all of the audio between the various speakers. And otherwise, just kind of sit back and watch it go by. You still have to be somewhat paying attention. You never know what might go flying by, but for the most part, it's making sure everything's still working when we get to the bottom.
I have a question for Jeff.
Now I'm scared.
What is a Tandemberg, and why don't we have one anymore, and what replaced it?
Oh, wow. Are we getting into the weeds, or who?
Greg asked me, and I need to give him an answer,
so
why not do it now?
Okay, well, Tandemberg was an early manufacturer of digital encoders. Okay. So, again, getting into the weeds, the way that we do it on Nautilus is we take the video signals. There's actually 4 video signals leaving the vessel, but you can only see 3 at home unless you're doing a web interaction. So there's 4 video paths, and each of those 4 video paths has a digital video to different type of digital converter. In this case, we're using IP converters. Tandemberg was a very early manufacturer, and basically we don't use Tandembergs anymore because they don't exist.
Oh, okay, well that checks out.
They are, they're very antiquated. They're in museums at this point, so.
What replaced it?
What are up there? And even these are old. Totally drawing a blank.
That's okay.
There's 6 of them on the back of the rack right here. I know exactly where they are. And even the ones that we're using are kind of getting to the end of their useful life.
I expect an answer on my desk tomorrow morning.
It'll pop into my head here. In the middle of the dive, we'll be looking at something and I'll go, oh, they're the bars.
But that's not the Cinedeck, right?
No, the Cinedecks are what we record to.
Okay.
We have 2 Cinedecks, one that's dedicated to Argus, one that's dedicated to Hercules. And those are the high definition recorders that we record all of that on.
Got it.
In addition to, we have 2 Aja recorders that are recording all the little hidden cameras that they don't see at home, that the pilots see. And 2 more recorders that are wild recorders that I don't know why they're here. We have them so that we can record stuff. They're actually backups. But every now and then we'll flash record to something. Hey, it looks like the mezzo came up.
All right, maybe the Doppler will be good too. We can only dive deep.
See, and
that's it.
Yes.
No 500 meter.
No.
Only 1,000 or more.
For those paying attention at home, let's see if I can do this. There. If you look at screen 3, the lower left part of the quad, earlier while we were descending, we only had 1 of those circles, and now we have both of those circles. And the front row is rejoicing that they have both of those circles. They have both the sonars now.
We use those circles to help our navigation once we're down there, so we can get a sense of the terrain that's surrounding each vehicle. And if I had to choose to only have one, it would probably be the one that wasn't working, which is on Argus, because Argus can only see so far, and we're kind of dragging Argus around by the ship, and it's a bit of a delay to move that thing around. So you can imagine if there's a wall fast approaching, you wouldn't quite see it fast enough, even with our lights and camera. So it's good to know using remote sensing, which so we're sending acoustic pulses and listening for the return. It's good to know what surrounds you without seeing it. By the way, Jess and Jake, at this depth, when on descent, just with like the forward way, which we obviously need, by the time once we get down there and you try to turn around, you're probably gonna be chasing your tail for a while because Argus wants to go back that way.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So that'll be fun. So you don't feel crazy when you're down there, like, what? It's just Argus is driving away from me.
No, it's a great point. Thanks, Jenny.
It is funny though, if you look right here, that the track has been back and forth. Have you been doing that?
No.
Well, yeah, it's like naturally zigzag.
Some weird currents.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm out of auto heading, so I'm just kind of going with the flow down there.
Yeah.
Is it a zigzag or is it a spiral? Can you tell?
Zigzag. Yeah, zigzag. It wouldn't be. Yeah, it's not a spiral because we're kind of constantly descending.
Oh, what's this?
Yeah.
What? Oh, that looks like bio goop, hopefully.
Oh yeah, bio goop it is.
Good eye.
We are now completed here on our 8 to 12 watch. We have our full back row. Wonder if I can introduce Dr. Beth Orcutt.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, hello to everybody online. Evening Hawaii time or wherever you may be. I am a scientist from the Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Sciences in Maine. This is my second Nautilus dive. To be here in the back row, we're going to be seeing Haeo. Am I saying that correctly? Seamount, I think for the first time. I don't believe anybody has ever done an ROV dive at this seamount before, so whatever we see will be new. I'm excited for that.
All right, I know there's going to be lots of rock talk, so before we get to that, maybe I'll have Kamala, can you introduce yourself, and do you mind introducing the name of this seamount as well?
Sure. Aloha nui kako, Kalama Ehu here. I am our Olelo Hawaii liaison, our Hawaiian language liaison that's doing mainly ship-to-shore interactions, but I'm very lucky to be able to join the crew this evening on our 8 to 12 watches. The pronunciation of the seamount that we're descending on is Ha'aheo. So if everybody at our viewers at home, just to get a little bit, just to crowdsource a little bit of participation, Ha'aheo. It's gonna be Ha'aheo. H-A Okina-e H-E-O. If you're listening in, hopefully we can get you guys some baseline, maybe Hawaiian language stuff, maybe some pronunciation. But if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. I think we have the chat box live. Thank you, Lindsay, for keeping an eye on that. So who knows, maybe we can play a few games in the meantime, crowdsource some of the information, see how everybody's doing out there. We got 4 hours, so thank you to the team. Thank you for everybody on our watch. And yeah, mahalo.
Mahalo. Yeah, we do have 4 hours, and we are kind of approaching the halfway mark of our descent. We're at 1,300 meters, anticipating an initial depth of 3,000 meters. Now, Beth, that's a little bit deeper than last night. What do you anticipate that making a big impact on what we're seeing initially on the seafloor?
Well, that's part of the reason we picked this depth is because we don't really know what we might find. On yesterday's dive at a seamount further south, just outside the monument boundary, which is a seamount that does not have a formal name. We started at about 2,700 meters and worked our way up, and we noticed that at the beginning of that dive, at deeper depths, we saw black corals, and as we ascended up the flank of that seamount, we didn't see them much more frequently as we move up. And so maybe starting at an even deeper depth, we'll see, do we see them at those deeper depths? Do they similarly maybe become less abundant as we move up? But yeah, it's a little hard to say because this depth range isn't explored a ton in terms of the distribution of these organisms, and so that's why we want to pick these particular deeper depths.
Thank you. And a major objective here scientifically is to characterize some of the geological structure and of course ultimately analyze some of the rocks sampled for age as well as the microbiota and alteration that happens over time. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe kind of the spectrum of rocks we might see and what we're interested in the most on this dive?
Yeah, I am trying to pull up a map to refresh my memory of what this seamount looks like. I think that Chris has one in here. Yeah, so the seamount that we're diving on, Haha'eo seamount, is towards the northern end of this string of seamounts that we're going to. So it's kind of at the top end and a little to the east. And it is a north-south oriented seamount, kind of long and skinny. We hope to do a dive. We're doing this dive now. We'll do another dive here later on the northern end. And based on the bathymetry that we have from this site, it does not seem, which you can't see necessarily in the dive plan because it's too zoomed in. But if you were to look at the cruise plan for the overall cruise, you could see that the seamount we're going to has mostly ridge structure and may not have been exposed above the sea surface to form one of these flat top geos, which is other seamounts in this region have that structure. So we won't be going all the way to the top, but we do know that at least this seamount, when it was formed, the magmatic injection was not significant enough to make it a big enough mountain to then get up into the air above the sea surface. And so the rock samples that we collect might tell us a little bit more about the conditions of the mid-plate volcanism that were generating the seamount, the mineral composition of the rocks, the grain size of the minerals in the rocks will tell us things about those conditions. So as we ascend up the ridge flank, we'll be looking for rocks that will help tell us that story, tell us how this seamount formed, how old the seamount is, as well as how have those rocks altered over time. So we'll be aiming for different types of rocks to help us tell those different stories because the information that they contain might be changed depending on whether they've gotten really altered or whether they've been protected from alteration. And
when you say age, give us a ballpark here. I know you can't say exactly an age,
right.
But what could the possible range of the ages of these seamounts be?
Yeah, so the Hawaiian Island chain and the northwestern Hawaiian Islands that make up the central core of the monument that we're in, the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, those range from basically geologically very young, 0 million years where the big island is of Hawaii, up to about 30 or 40 or so as you move out towards the west. We think these seamounts that we're going to be diving on are actually a bit older than that, but that's a hypothesis at this point. And so we want to collect samples to help us understand, are they older than that Hawaiian island chain? And were they maybe formed by a hot spot somewhere else in the plate or at a different point in time? So maybe these are, 50, 80, who knows how many millions of years old, but no matter what, they're old. Just how old is to be discovered.
Thank you so much. And just speaking of just kind of the ancient and sacredness of the space, Kalamehu, is there additional context you would want to add to this place that we are in?
Yeah, thank you. So like, well, we had our first like SPL live explanation last night, so hopefully it's gotten a little better since then. But generally, we're looking at the extent within the Papahana Mokuakea Monument. Actually, this is a good opportunity. If you guys are joining us at home, and I know that we're all online already, if you guys want to go ahead and go to papahanamokuakea.gov, PAPAHANAUMOKUAKEA. Oh, yeah, papahanamokuakea.gov. And then what you guys can scroll down a little bit and you guys will see a map over here. And this actually has a series of names. And so there's 3 sets of names. And so the first ones are going to be the sort of like the English names or some of the other settler names or whatever it happened over there, whatever you want to call them. Anyways, the second blue names that are going to be right above them are going to be names that were given by the Hawaiian Lexicon Committee. I wanted to correct that. I think I might have said that there was a culture working group, but if we refer to the map, it actually says the Hawaiian Lexicon Committee. And then we have the yellow names on the top that actually come from the Kai'ai Kawaha genealogy names. And so these names are found, actually, they can be found in an article done by Dr. Kekuewa Kikiloi, whose PhD research was on Papahanamokuakea, and he was able to locate an older genealogy. And so Kai'ai Kawaha was actually a student at the School of Lahainaluna, and he had printed these in the Hawaiian newspapers at the time. And so thanks to Dr. Kekuewa's research and stuff like that, he was able to find these names and then begin the process of relocating them back to each of their islands. But otherwise, we see Niho, I mean, like I said last night, right? So the Hawaiian, just the general worldview of the Hawaiian world, I guess, is that if we're looking at this same map from sort of east to west, right, we have our youngest islands down here in the east, and that represents very much like very live volcanic sort of islands, whereas we begin to go up and then go back up to the chain to the northwest, and we sort of see these islands get older and older and older. And so the one sense of that is that it's not only the general Hawaiian life cycle going from east to west, from sort of like the life to like the death and the transition into the next realm sort of, but also like genealogically in a sense that, in succession, right, they have each of these ages. And so we start off in the realm of Ao in the main Hawaiian Islands, which is basically like light or like a more secular sort of area. And then at the transition at the area between about Nihoa and Mokumanamana, we begin to transition into an area where we are considered transitioning, well, we're considered basically transitioning into the realm of the older gods, or like the realm of the gods generally, if you will. Yeah, I shared that there are a lot of older stories, or mo'olelo, if you will, that cite some of these areas. Specifically, one that I'm familiar with is Kuehelani, and that's going to be a place where a lot of like older deities and stuff are actually born and reside, and then they have recorded journeys that go into Hawaii and vice versa. So other chiefs that come down from the main Hawaiian Islands and will migrate up there. And so it's pretty cool to see that exchange. Yeah, that's just a general worldview. If anybody's listening out there and you guys have any corrections for me or any questions, then I will do my best. But yeah, anyone not always welcome. So mahalo.
Please put your questions in the chat. And if you do not know where that is, if you are hearing our voice, you are probably on nautiluslive.org. If you just scroll down past the quad view or past whatever view you're looking at, there's a little green light that says we're here to take your questions. Go ahead and type your questions in there for Kalamaihu. And I'm sorry, I missed it. Could you say the name of the seamount one more time?
And so the name of the seamount out there, and if you're at home and listening, just say it out loud, or if it's not too loud for everybody, but Ha'aheo.
Ha'aheo.
Ha'aheo is going to be the name of the seamount. And then thank you, Beth. I think she just pointed out that we are below the island of Komole, if you guys are referring to the map right now. So we're just to the south, just about halfway up the monument.
Yeah, and so another interesting feature of tonight's dive compared to the dive we did yesterday is that we are much closer to that central core of the northwestern Hawaiian island chain. And the seamount we're diving on is not very far away from a part of the monument that is known to have really high coral diversity. And so an interest for this dive today, and also the next dive that will happen on this seamount, is to see what that connectivity is like, and if we also see a really high level of diversity on this seamount as an extension of the diversity that's been seen elsewhere in the monument in this region.
And our coral expert just walked out.
I know.
But I do want to probe Steve on how that makes him feel.
If we're all listening right now would probably be the best time to go at all the coral questions, and then we'll ask them all at one time later when he gets back.
That's right.
Nah.
Speaking of, I'm realizing I didn't bring my bingo card tonight, but I'm hoping that Rennie has his.
Oh yeah, always. My mental bingo card.
All right.
Price of Gorgon.
I really want a Victor Gorgia, you know, and then Steve would laugh at me like, at these steps.
I really hope wherever Steve is right now, he hears us.
We miss you, Steve.
All right.
All right, well, not too many questions yet. Lots of folks settling in. Sounds like folks are stocking up on snacks and are in for the long haul to watch this dive.
Don't be afraid out there, gang. We're here for another 4 hours. There's going to be a lot going on, but we'd love to interact with you guys as much as we can.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what kind of snacks people get excited about.
Oh no, please don't be writing snacks into the chat.
Like what, you're gonna like look for corals. What kind of snacks do you want for that?
Please stop saying snack.
Okay.
All right, we do have a rock question for you, Beth.
Oh, okay.
Wondering if the pressure at a 3,000 meter depth affects rocks or other strata while it's down there or when you bring it up?
Oh, that's a fun question. Yes and no, depending on what it is that you're trying to look at. So I know of scientists who are really interested in understanding signatures for how rocks formed, and one of the compounds of chemicals that's used to understand that is helium. There are certain isotopes of helium that record a signature of their formation. As you all probably know. Oh, that's a cool thing floating by. Helium is a gas, and so when those samples are collected, the scientists working on them try to use methods to contain the pressure of the sample as it's being recovered so that there's not any outgassing effects that might interfere with the signal. So what that might look like is I've seen them in the shape of like a little PVC cylinder with a lid that locks, and then it maintains the pressure, comes up on board, and you kind of carefully release that pressure, take the sample out, and get your samples right away. But for most types of things that we study, from a geology standpoint, bringing them up from deep depths is not a big issue. For me, as someone who cares about the microbes living on those rocks, is definitely something that I have to keep in mind when I'm trying to understand the functions of microbes and trying to measure those rates in the lab, because there are definitely studies out there that show that organisms that are adapted to pressure, when you bring them up to atmospheric pressure, they don't do as well. So they don't, some do better, some do worse, probably most do worse. So we have to keep that in mind and always record our measurements as potential rates, because it's not an in situ rate that's measured on the seafloor. There's only a few labs that have the specialized equipment to collect and maintain samples under pressure for doing microbiology analysis. So that's definitely a limiting factor in our understanding of these ecosystems. Every time I see a proposal with people wanting to use pressure vessels, I'm like, yes, that's so great. We need more people to do that. And yeah, so it is something we have to think about, but we think about it in different ways depending on what we're trying to assess.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Since we still have 1,300 meters approximately to descend,
yeah,
wondering if we can do, we're getting a lot of round robin questions, which I feel like is maybe a good one for blue water. So we have a lot of experienced scientists and pilots and navigators here. So everyone on watch, we're gonna go round robin really quickly. What's the most memorable moment you've had on a dive?
Ooh. I'll start, maybe. The memory that comes to my mind is I had the great fortune of being able to do an actual submarine dive with this the Johnson Sea Link, which is one of the submersibles that has a plexiglass sphere. So I can't go super deep, but doesn't matter because it's still really cool. You're going to the bottom of the ocean. And because it has that plexiglass sphere, you can see a lot more during the ascent and descent than we do with our camera view here. And I was not prepared for the experience of rising through the water at the same rate as the bubbles we were releasing out of the submarine. So they just basically like shimmer and hover right at your eye level for many minutes. Is really mesmerizing. So that's my most memorable experience that I could think of right off the top of my head.
Thank you. Quick memorable moment. We'll popcorn around.
I say anytime that we see the deep Staria jelly, that's a really cool one. I've seen 3 of them now on Hercules dives. One was close to the seafloor, the other was midwater, and then the third was midwater, but we were just caught a glimpse of it. And by the time we couldn't really stop the operation and chase it because we were just on the way up. But
can you say the name again, Rennie?
That's the deep Staria jelly, and I think deep Staria enigmatica or enigmat. Yeah, that's one of them, and I don't know the Latin name for the other one, but or if we even got confirmed IDs on them, but they're quite beautiful and hauntingly mysterious. They have a resident isopod inside.
For me, it definitely has to be the Octopus Garden.
Oh,
I just remember the sheer amount of octopus that was just, it seemed endless, like the whole dive.
Was that in the Monterey Canyon?
Yes.
Okay. At
You
Davidson
were there?
Seamount?
Yes, off of Davidson, yeah.
Cool.
Were you on watch during that dive?
Yes. Oh, for the second time when we came back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
So we knew what we were going to say, but I mean, it was still crazy.
Yeah, I was there. That was also the same dive as the whale fall.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a good dive.
Great dive.
Well, yeah, I'll have to say several, but one that's really memorable was we were in the Gulf of Mexico and we had a close encounter with a sperm whale.
Right.
Yeah, that was pretty memorable. I remember I was sitting out actually watching sperm whales on the surface. They were,
wow.
you know, around the ship, and one of our science communication fellows at the time, and some of our scientists came out running saying, "There's a sperm whale on the TV," or you know, on the in the seafloor, and so everyone ran inside. We all thought the show was outside because you know the sperm whales were on the surface, but it turns out that they were coming to check out the ROV. And yeah, that was really awesome. They hung around for a little bit and went on their way. And I think the footage of that is actually a highlight on the website.
Yeah, definitely check it out. That was Steve. I'm just gonna go backwards. That was Steve, and we had Jake, Rennie, and Beth. Maybe the last three can say your name and your highlight.
Yeah, I'm trying to pinpoint my absolute favorite because there's so many really cool moments underwater.
Especially when we're picking up rocks.
Especially when we're picking up rock. But yeah, one of them that really sticks out in my mind though is looking at the USS Independence when it's a scuttled ship, and you have all these really incredible just sponges growing off of what people would be crawling up and down the ship on, you know. So that was something fantastic to see, and just kind of realize that, you know, 50 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that now, but maybe 70 years ago, 60, folks are actually kind of like all of us out here, just walking on those same, I don't know, decks, and it kind of struck a chord for a moment there, that one, seeing history, but also two, seeing how life has populated that ship when it's subsea.
Well, I'd have to say with all of my experiences, which basically culminates at about 5.5 hours, about 5 minutes ago, would probably have to be along the lines of maybe what Jess was talking about too, but in terms of like seeing history, but more so like, you know, we talked about yesterday about like the sort of cultural origins and like how we regard like these organisms as basically our ancestors and stuff like that. And so it's kind of interesting to see how within like Hawaiian waters, within the context of like Hawaiian waters and just like place-based stuff, is that there's a good possibility that it's been a long time since we've had an interaction with these, with our, I mean, I was going to call them basically our ancestors, our kupuna, if you would, just to honor them in the genealogical way, but just be able to interact with them and to understand that how old they really are. And then actually, I think that one thing that we've really had an interesting thing to learn is just about like I think Chris was talking about the general distribution of these organisms in terms of like how far they really are. So that really brings me back to like the concept of like continuity across these various geographical region, and thinking of how these organisms or these common ancestors really connect us all. And I think that was another thing too that was brought up with like these seamounts, or even like all of the like the plumes and like all of this stuff. And so been here for a while, but you know, still a lot of exciting things. So mahalo to the team. Yesterday was my first dive, and so yeah, thank you guys.
Awesome. Thanks for coming back for dive 2. Jeff, I know you've seen a lot. What's a memorable dive?
That's the funny thing. I haven't seen all of these cool. I've seen the video of all of these cool things: the whale fall and the octopus. I was just thinking. I think it was at the end of the season, and we were basically playing in the Catalina Basin, and we found a rock that was just this beautiful orchestration of all of these tiny little things. And because we were playing, we took the time, and we could push in really tight, and we got the vehicle in really close, and just everything that you could see. And it's nothing spectacular. We see it all the time, but that one always kind of makes me think, you know, that and Lindsay's hat.
Yeah, that was incredible.
That was fun.
But I know what you're saying though about the little stuff. You sit there, if you just plop down, sit on the seafloor, and zoom in, you'll see things that you didn't even realize you were flying over before.
And I mean, my marine biology was in the 6th grade, and you just look at it and go, "That's really cool. I think I used to know what those are." But.
Thanks everyone for sharing.
What's your most memorable?
It is hard. So until yesterday, it had been about 5 years since I've been on a watch. And 5 years ago, I was off my home state of Washington, and we did a number of very, very cool dives. One that was very memorable was the Grays Harbor Sponge Reef, which is a deep sea glass sponge reef that, to me, just completely blew my mind that this was about 50 miles offshore of my home. And I think similar to what others are describing, just kind of zooming in on these mammoth, massive very old organisms and feeling very much in an alien space and very much a guest in this community. And it was, but also being neighbors in a way as well. So I think that that was really impactful on me, and can't wait to learn more in this place where I'm even more of a guest. And on that note, Kalamaihu, we have another question about wondering where folks can go to learn more about the Native Hawaiian people and this monuments area. Sorry, I'll read this again. Wondering specifically about the relationship between the Native Hawaiian people and the Papahānaumokuākea Marine Monument and seamounts here, be that spiritual or otherwise. Could you maybe just send out either the same link, or if you have a different link to as a resource for folks?
Sure. You know, and so there's actually, so I'm familiar with 2 websites right off the top of my head, and maybe we can find a way to get them out there. But the first one is going to be papahānaumokuākea.gov, papahānaumokuākea.gov. The second one is actually, well, that I'm looking at because there are another group that's like involved with the monument itself. It's going to be the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and their acronym is well, I don't know if acronym is the right word, but it's going to be OHA, OHA.org. And then there you can kind of see like not only some of their land holdings, stuff like that, they're like a quasi sort of like government entity within Hawaii. But if you look on there, OHA, they have a lot of information and a bunch of reports and stuff that just came out from that didn't just come out, but they have a lot of information that pertains specifically to the monument. One of the things that I find super, I'm actually looking at one of the documents right now, is called Maikopomai, but I'm just going to read the abstract for it. But Maikopomai is a culmination of over 10 years of discussions with Native Hawaiian communities, specifically the Papahānaumokuākea Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group, and the managing agencies to provide a Native Hawaiian perspective into Papahānaumokuākea management. The guidance document uses traditional concepts and cultural traditions related to Papahānaumokuākea in its structure to set a foundation for how management should be conducted. It will be used to help the agencies think about activities in and about Papahānaumokuākea through a Native Hawaiian perspective, and lays the groundwork for development of the next Papahānaumokuākea management plan. And I don't have a lot of context right now, but someone else on this voyage who would have a lot of information about that kind of, or in terms of like the monument's history and stuff like that, is going to be Andy Collins. And I believe that there was something that we were talking about. So I'll go and think about it. But anyway, just to answer your question, so OHA and the papahānaumokuākea.gov website are going to be some good places to start. I would most likely go there for information, cultural information pertaining specifically to the monument. Native Hawaiian and other stuff. Otherwise, the next best thing would probably be to talk to Native Hawaiian. Yeah.
Mahalo.
Yeah.
I was wondering, were you thinking about referring to this?
Yes.
Yeah. So it is, we do have the green light to announce that the National Marine Sanctuary designation for Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument. Sorry, I garbled that a little bit, but it is currently a monument. The consideration for designation of a marine sanctuary is being considered, and you're welcome to read that information on the site that Kalamaihu has already put out there. It's that papahānaumokuākea.gov.
Yeah, and for folks that are on, use Twitter, you can find that also at Hawaii Reefs is another place that's kind of a easy go-to. I'm guessing it's the same for other social media platforms, but I'm not sure. But to kind of connect with the monument and hear about these latest developments, as well as links to resources about the monument and how considering cultural connection to this space is an important part of the monument's management.
Lots of questions coming in. We have folks from around the world. Actually, most folks must be staying up late in the US, but well represented in Australia as well. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your questions. I'll try to get to a few here before we hit the seafloor, but if you're just joining us, we are on our second dive of this expedition, Lu'ua ia ahiki ika papaku. You can read more about our overall mission and expedition objectives on our website. But for this particular dive, we are diving on the Aheo Seamount here in the Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument. We are descending to a depth of about 3,000 meters.
Yeah, we're currently at a little over 2,200.
Don't need to look way over there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've got a few more minutes to go. I'm not sure exactly what our descent rate is.
We've got 24 minutes.
Okay, great. Woohoo. Set your timer to that. Go make your snacks.
Yeah. It'll be a little longer. We got to, settle down.
Well, please don't talk about snacks. Okay, so a couple quick questions here. Someone was seeing, I don't know if this is a question for, just chatting, maybe Rennie or maybe Jeff. It looked like the water temp was shifting from 36 Fahrenheit to 2.5 Fahrenheit. Was that maybe just the gauge calibrating? I don't know.
Let's pull that up.
Yeah, the temperature currently is a little less than 2, or around 2. I'm not sure what the surface water temperature was like when we started the dive, but...
Was this surface water that they were looking at? Or just the Herc nav?
Yeah, it probably is the Herc temp.
Side dive data. Let me just look. I think we can change the last hour, change that to last 6 hours. Herc water temp. Yeah, it looks, it was around 26 at the top, and then dropped down to, like you said, now about 1.8. I would suspect it would just be something that had to do with the website.
Okay.
Because I think it has the depth and temperature listed on the website.
Yeah, that's from a few minutes ago, so yeah, thank you. Someone was here last night, and maybe this is for Steve, thanks, Steve. Wondering if that organism that you collected last night came up, and was it identified?
I think they might be referring to the anemone we collected, on a rock sample, and it was sampled successfully. We were able to remove it from the rock quite easily. It has not been fully identified the species yet, but having the sample is half the battle, and it will we'll reach out to our taxonomic experts and notify them that the samples are being held in a repository and will be sent there soon, so they could examine it and hopefully provide an identification, give us some insight about.
Yeah, typically that can take some time, right?
Yeah, it could take some time, yeah. Unfortunately, with anemones, it's not like we can just send them a photo. A lot of these animals, especially anemones and gelatinous organisms more broadly, have very complex internal anatomical structures that need to be assessed with a physical specimen.
All right, another question for Rennie, I think. I think this is a navigation question. Are there plans to use Starlink when available on Nautilus?
I don't believe there are plans for that. We currently use a different satellite for our internet needs.
Thank you. And a question for our ROV team. Why 2 ROVs?
Very good question. Well, not always 2 ROVs are needed. You can either have 2 or you can have 1, depending on preferences, I suppose. But yeah, for us, we have Argus is a bit higher up in the water column and Herc is a little bit lower down. Argus is, as we call it, the eye in the sky, if you will. So we have sonars on it that we can look a bit further ahead, see some impending features. Also, there's a really stiff 6/8 cable, we call it a steel cable, going from Argus to the ship. So that feels all the movements that the ship feels, if you will. So if we're heaving and whatever sea state we're in. We'll also see that motion in Argus, but there's a really nice tether, which is a softer tether, if you will, that connects Argus and Hercules. So Hercules has a lot of flexibility because Argus is disassociating that motion from the ship from Hercules. So both we use it for kind of situational awareness, looking forward and planning, but also for disassociating ship movements.
Makes for the smooth video that Jess is able to get.
Makes for some smooth video.
Some smooth
And
rock collecting.
Also makes for some pretty cool shots of Hercules as well.
Yeah, that is nice to see the context.
It's like third person almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shots last night of Herc with an overhang above it were pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I guess that would be a question for you, Beth. Does that help you kind of contextualize what you're seeing in Hercules, you know, the overview geologically?
Oh yeah, for sure. With Herc, we get such a zoomed in view, and with Argus, you can see a larger perspective on the structures we're on. So I remember yesterday, there was a ridge feature we were climbing up, and we could see that there was kind of like blocks in the rocks. They weren't just these extrusive lavas. And the view in Argus almost looked like a dome feature. So you could actually see that it was a syncline with multiple layers on top of it. And you would never get that perspective from Herc because you can't get that far and see that level of detail.
Needs the lights of Hercules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much easier. It's right there in front of you. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you can look in the bottom left quadrant, our satellite feed 3, you can see where we're all sitting in the control van. There are a lot of screens. Sometimes I forget which screen is the most accessible. You're just seeing our lead scientist. Where are we waving? Oh,
I was waving at the camera
Okay.
for the lower left, and now I'm waving to the camera on the lower right.
There we go.
They don't see the lower right at home.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
So many cameras. So many screens.
Yeah, there's... Hey, Jeff, how many cameras are there in the control van?
There are 6.
6 cameras.
We could actually do a tour if you wanted.
Do it.
Oh, yeah, let's do a tour.
Sure, all right. So there's camera 1. Gets us the front row. We'll get back there. So.
Is that this one?
Yeah, that's that one and all.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, so there's Rennie.
Oh.
We'll go down. There's Rennie.
All right.
There's Jazz.
Hello.
All right.
This shirt, I knew this shirt was going to get some screen time.
There you go.
Wave cam.
I'm hidden in the corner. We don't see me.
By design.
Yeah, by design. Steve is actually hiding behind the screen on the left there. He's not in
That's
the
true.
You want to wave to the folks at home, Steve?
That one
All right.
over there.
Over there.
Yeah.
And then we have, yes, the rest of the back row there. Yeah.
You do know our names, right, Jeff?
Yes, I know. I was actually thinking of something else here.
We're the back row team.
The back row team. And then there's camera 2, which is a really bad shot that we never use because it's looking over the Herc pilot.
Yeah.
But we have this up there so that you can see kind of what they're doing with the manipulator arm. We rarely use that one.
It's right
Alright.
above you.
That's 3, which is the over the shoulder. I think
right.
Beth was kind of waving through before.
Oh.
Yeah. That's 4, which is the angled shot.
Oh, right.
Kind of over
That's like
Lindsay's
over
left
there.
shoulder there. This will be nothing because, that would normally be a face-on view of the Herc pilot, but most of the Herc pilots kind of push that camera off so that you can't see it. Amazingly, yes, it's never, and then that's the same thing in the back row, pointed at typically the chief scientist.
Yep.
So, and it's actually a little off kilter. And the camera that you were playing with is actually that one. That's back in our studio.
Oh.
So if you do any interactions, that's the camera that you would see. You can see the two chairs sitting there. And we have a really, when we're doing interactions, you have a really great background of the control room, the control vans.
Speaking of interactions, if you're still interested, especially if you are in Hawaii, we would encourage you to register for one of those free 30-minute interactions. You can be talking directly with our crew. We have very, very limited spaces available, and those are mostly outside of the morning times for Hawaii time. But you can find that link on nautiluslive.org.
Although I think there's plenty of spots next week around the holiday, so.
This is true. If you would like to talk to us, well.
Yeah, share your Thanksgiving meal with us.
We'll be sure to try to eat before that, just so then that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't have to watch us eat. That would not be fun.
Or just so that we don't get hungry and go down into the mess hall and be like, well.
Since we're talking about food, we've got some questions about seasickness. What's the swell report? It's kind of a theme coming in.
Okay.
What is the swell currently? It seems like it's not as strong.
Yeah, I mean,
like
this whole sea state from when we left out here, although it was larger before, there are these really kind of like long period rollers. So I'd say it's, I mean, right now just, it'd be easier if the if it was daytime and we could see out those cameras, but it feels like even with the period, probably only a meter or so.
I was going to say, I thought it was, somebody wrote 3 feet downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a gentle roll.
You feel it more in the transit,
so
depending
far.
on.
Oh, the transit was much more than gentle.
Yeah, those were, yeah.
Yeah, no comment. I'm not going to comment on the seasickness. I don't know if anyone cares to share their seasickness remedies. Or.
It was so fun. You guys aren't having fun? Just me?
With seasickness?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
600% sarcasm on that one.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
First day, single hull vessel in the trough.
Yeah.
You guys got to come and check it out for yourselves. Put an application with OET. Join us on our expedition.
Yeah.
The sunsets make it all worth it. Whew. Thanks for your questions. Keep them coming. We're getting close to our seafloor start of the dive here.
Yeah, we'll approach the seafloor not too long, and then we'll have to spend a little bit of time settling out, getting everything ready. So we'll probably have bottom in sight, but not be able to do anything for a little bit.
Yeah.
I always do love when we land right on a spectacular sponge garden or coral, I won't say reef, but a collection of corals. And the scientists in the back row are going crazy, and we're like, just be patient for a moment. we'll get there.
Is that when Jeff shows the face-on view of the scientists?
Actually, I remember, it was Papahanaumokuakea cruise NA101 several years ago. I remember distinctly we landed right in this spectacular sponge area with these gigantic sponges. We were getting settled, and a lot of people were in the back row, kind of shouting out names of different types.
And after the ROV gets settled, what's the first thing the video guy does? Black balance, takes the picture away.
Yeah,
let's take the picture away for a minute while I tweak things.
So mean.
It gives Rennie a chance to get his bingo card out.
That's right, yeah. Cheat sheet.
I don't know if we need to introduce them, but do we have any folks in our science chat this evening, Beth?
That is a good question. We're a little light on the scientist ashore department. It's mostly folks associated with crews that are out here. Looks like we have, and I apologize if I mess up this name, Matt Koskela and Asako also with us. So thanks both if you're tuned in. They might also just have their chats logged in, even if they're not watching, which is great. And we on the dive yesterday, we're getting some real-time and post-dive feedback from our